Is it? No. Here's Young on the drive. Floater up and good. Atlanta takes a...
You wouldn't think that a skinny 6'1" point guard would be, at one point, the biggest villain in the basketball world, but that was what happened in 2021 when Trae Young embraced his villain role and turned into one of the biggest superstars in the game with that incredible turn to the dark side. Of course, he didn't do anything wrong except ticking off the people of New York, but let's look at how Young turned into the biggest villain in the Big Apple.
Here is Young. Finds his spot. Young on the floater. Puts it in.
There aren't plenty of NBA players who had the same meteoric rise to success that Trae Young enjoyed. He wasn't one of the best players coming out of high school, struggling to crack the top 20 in most scouting reports. After all, he was undersized, skinny, and unathletic. Despite that, Young found a home with the University of Oklahoma to become the program's first 5-star recruit since 2010. And it was with his stay with OU that turned him into a household name and a nationwide sensation. Young was an incredible college player because of his combination of advanced skills and competitive spirit. He didn't look like an undersized player on the court because he outplayed every single player he went up against using his incredible combination of ball handling, passing, shooting, and scoring. There was no one who could match his ability to put the ball through the hoop or make others look good with his passing. As a point guard, he always had the ball in his hands, turning the OU offense into the Trae Young show. He facilitated the ball incredibly well and made his teammates look good in the process. But when it was time to score, Young knew how to take matters into his own hands using a rare combination of skill and technical savvy. The first thing that popped out of Young's offensive repertoire was his shooting. His ability to shoot the ball wasn't exactly at the level of Stephen Curry's efficiency, but what surprised people was his awesome range. He was shooting the ball well beyond the three-point line and was making them well enough to force defenders to try to defend him near the half-court line.
Down those big threes. Three for the lead. Got it! Got it!
Young was creating those shots off the dribble, making people realize he could be one of the first products of the Curry era of young players who grew up watching Steph and emulated his game. Young wasn't afraid of hoisting those shots off the dribble, no matter how far he was from the hoop. But at the same time, he also had the ability to create shots close to the basket, using his quickness and slight frame to get around defenders and find an opening in the paint. He was a scoring wizard in college, as he eventually ended his freshman year as a nationwide sensation. Young led the entire nation in scoring and assists, becoming the first player in the NCAA men's division to do so. He became a legend in just his lone season in college as he carried his talents to the legendary 2018 NBA draft, which was the same draft class that produced Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Jalen Brunson. He was one of the headliners of that class despite his apparent lack of size and athleticism. Once again, Young made headlines when he became part of one of the most surprising draft day trades in recent history when the Atlanta Hawks traded 3rd overall pick Luka Doncic to the Dallas Mavericks, who drafted Young 5th overall. With Doncic turning into a superstar in no time, people called this one of the craziest trades in history. And this was one of the reasons Young developed a chip on his shoulder. Despite what people said about the trade, Young was set to become the Atlanta Hawks' cornerstone as he was supposed to be their point guard for the future. He struggled during the initial part of the 2018-19 season as he couldn't solve the NBA's level of size, skill, and athleticism. Young was shooting blanks and was getting bullied. However, he eventually adjusted and gave Doncic a good run for his money for the 2019 Rookie of the Year award, only for the Slovenian to win it. Despite that, there was a positive outlook on Young's development during the second half of the season as people saw his potential as a future superstar.
Trae goes to the handle, spins, guides in, got caught, score!
Young's rise was almost meteoric. After averaging 19.1 points and 8.1 assists as a rookie, he surprised everyone by improving his numbers during his second year in the league as he started to show why he was one of the best young players in the NBA. Young found his shooting touch, hitting long jumpers at a respectable rate. But the scariest part of his game was his ability to toy with defenders out of the perimeter, often taking them to the paint where he could hit layups and floaters or force his defender to foul him. He mastered the art of foul baiting, basically using his body against defenders to force referees to call fouls. To that end, he averaged 29.6 points during the 2019-20 season, increasing his scoring average by more than 10 points. He was also named an All-Star for the very first time in 2020. But while he had already turned into a true star in the league during his second season, it was during the 2020-21 season that he actually evolved into a worldwide sensation, but often not for the best reasons. It all started early in the season when Young was putting up elite numbers for the Atlanta Hawks, but wasn't exactly leading the team anywhere. The Hawks were struggling to win games, primarily because this was a young team that was still finding its identity. But others pointed to the coaching problems, as there were people who believed that head coach Lloyd Pierce was having issues with his best player. There were reports of Young not exactly seeing eye to eye with his coach, even supporting the team's decision to fire Pierce. That was one of the reasons people started seeing Young in a different way. Still, it was normal for a young player to have clashes with his coach, especially when things aren't going well for the team. Eventually, the Hawks replaced Pierce with Nate McMillan, who immediately sold his philosophy to the rest of the team. After starting the season 14-20 under Pierce, the Hawks turned things around by winning 27 of their 38 games under McMillan's leadership. They were defending better and were actually playing like a well-oiled machine. Even Young, though his scoring numbers dropped a bit, was actually buying into McMillan's style. With the Hawks playing at that level, Atlanta managed to sneak into the playoffs as the 5th seed, winning 41 of their 72 games. Young averaged 25.3 points and 9.4 assists, but was neither an All-Star nor an All-NBA player, primarily because of the early season issues he and the Hawks had with the coaching staff. But it didn't matter, because they made their way to the playoffs after years of rebuilding. And it was during the 2021 playoffs when Trae Young transformed from a collegiate hero into an NBA villain.
And Butler. Trae. Bottoms!
At that point, Young was already quite a polarizing figure in the NBA. Other than the perception that he chased his old coach out of Atlanta and was an uncoachable young player, there weren't a lot of people who liked his playing style. You see, Young had an unorthodox way of scoring. Though he had Curry's range and could shoot the ball far from the three-point line, he wasn't the most efficient shooter. To that end, he added new dimensions to his game that may have turned a lot of fans off. This included his foul-baiting tactics. There was no doubt Young could manipulate his defenders using screens and crafty dribbles. He knew how to get his man off of him out on the perimeter by using the pick and roll to his advantage. But in doing so, he also developed a style that fans hated. When navigating himself through screens, Young often didn't try to get to the basket right away after losing his defender. Instead, he would slow down close to the paint just as his defender was trying to recover to him. With his defender unable to stop at a dime while recovering on defense, Young would use his body by jumping into the defender to draw fouls. At times, he did so while his defender was literally behind him. And if there's one thing fans hate, it's a player who loves drawing fouls instead of playing the game the ethical way.
34 seconds to go here in the first half. Young to get the switch with Harris. A deep bomb! Oh!
Because of that, Young wasn't already a well-loved player in the eyes of many fans. But that only made the chip on his shoulder grow bigger, as he basically embraced the negativity and the hate, turning those into weapons that made him better. The unwitting victims of his revenge tour were the New York Knicks, the team the Hawks faced in the first round of the playoffs. The New York Knicks were a resurgent team that season after spending a few years struggling to win games. Powered by the all-star prowess of Julius Randle, that squad looked like it could make a deep playoff run. Of course, the playoffs are always better when the Knicks are playing because of the rowdy New York fans who love cheering for their team while booing opposing teams. It just so happened that Trae Young loved the negativity. Game 1 was tight, as both teams were tied at 105 with less than 10 seconds left in the game. The Hawks had the ball, and it was only right that they gave it to Young. He toyed with his defender out on the three-point line before driving against the lane with numerous Knicks converging on him. But he released a floater before the defenders could react. As the floater made its way through the bottom of the net, Young placed a finger over his mouth to quiet the crowd with a shush. He won the game for the Hawks while also winning the crowd's hatred. That was when he turned into the Knicks' biggest enemy throughout the entire series, as Young basically basked under the negative spotlight. New York tied the series by winning Game 2, only for the Hawks to dominate them in the next two games. While Young didn't have the same scoring performance he had in Game 1, his performances in Games 3 and 4 were great enough because he facilitated the offense at elite levels and ensured everyone had an equal opportunity to score.
2 for 6 now in the ball game. Young in a rush. Got it! Man.
But it was his performance in Game 5 that sealed his reputation as the biggest villain in the league at that moment in time. The Atlanta Hawks returned to New York for Game 5 as the people of the Big Apple tried to rally their team to extend the series. But Young and the Hawks were just too much for them. Under a minute left in the game, the Hawks were up by 12 points and were basically on their way to a victory. Young, however, had to pour salt into the New York wound. As the shot clock was winding down, he hoisted a 30-foot three-pointer that extended the lead to 15 points, basically burying the Knicks with that shot. What made it worse was the fact that he faced the New York crowd to bow to them, waving his hand goodbye after. This was the ultimate show of villainy from a Young player, as Young embraced his identity as the Knicks' most hated player. Young averaged 29.2 points and 9.8 assists against New York in the first round, basically pushing his team to the second round while earning the ire of the entire city of New York in the process. When you're the biggest basketball city's biggest enemy, you're basically the biggest villain in the league. As such, in 2021, Young was the biggest villain in the NBA. But instead of being sad about it, he embraced it because he found energy and strength in the negativity surrounding him. In fact, he used the very same negativity to power the Hawks through an upset win over the top-seeded Philadelphia 76ers, averaging 29 points and 10.9 assists in that series. But his statement moment in that series was when he forced Ben Simmons to give up a wide-open layup attempt under the basket by recovering to him on defense.
Spins on Gallinari, gives it up. Oh, he was right there. And a foul as Thibault goes to the basket.
The 6'1" Trae Young's presence basically destroyed the 6'10" Ben Simmons' confidence, who was afraid of getting fouled and sent to the free throw line where he struggled. Young was basically the surprise character of that entire 2021 playoff run. But all things had to end for him and the Hawks as they lost to the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. But Young still had a statement moment in that series as he finished Game 1 with 48 points and 11 assists in an upset win over the Bucks. He went on to miss 2 games in that series, as the belief was that the Hawks might have had a shot at a finals appearance had their best player been healthy the entire series. Still, despite the fact that the Hawks couldn't make it to the finals after 2 straight upset series wins in the playoffs, that series against the Knicks catapulted his name into stardom. He became one of the most notable players in the world, not just because of his skills, but also because of his villainous showmanship. He loved every minute of the hatred he received from opposing fans, turning it into his strength. And to some extent, people loved that about him, as he didn't fold under the pressure of being a villain in the league. To cap off that villainous run, he even appeared on an episode of WWE SmackDown at Madison Square Garden in New York as a guest star invited by Sami Zayn. In wrestling terms, Young was the biggest heel in the Garden that night as he came out to the boos of the New York faithful, who were surprised to see the man who booted them out of the 2021 playoffs in spectacular fashion. Now that's a true villain.